I cannot tell you what an incredible honor it is to be given the opportunity to do the final talk at the conference. It's my first time to the IBBY conference, and I've had just had a ball. It's been amazing. There's so many like-minded, wonderful people. What a thrill it is to meet face to face. I always find at a conference like this, I mean, it's a lovely size. You get to know people. You get to even to remember who they are sometimes, which is brilliant. It's human scale, and everything I believe in is about being human scale, whether it's a publisher or being in schools. You know, I like smallish schools, not giant schools, because you can get to know individual people. So it's a tremendous honor, a real thrill. So I'm Chris, and a very quick little bit of background, I suppose. I studied history at Cambridge, and then I became a journalist on the Sunday Times. And I was in the newsroom one day, and I was the first person in the Sunday Times ever to have a laptop. Yeah, it was a little Toshiba thing, and the editor came down the corridor and he said, "What's that?" I said, "Well, it's a laptop." And I showed him what a spreadsheet was, which he'd never seen before, and he was transformed on the spot, and he appointed me the science and technology correspondent. So I went from history to science like that, and then I spent quite a long time in newspapers. I suppose the idea is it's non-fiction writing, really, although some people call newspapers the last manufacturing industry, so there's a little bit of a segue sometimes. And after 10 years, I was invited to run an educational publishing company in Oxford, which I did. And then we had a bit of a crisis in our household, because I have two daughters, Matilda and Verity. They're now 26 and 24. I can't quite work out how that happened, but it seems to have passed very quickly. And but Matilda, when she was 8, basically she started suffering from what I would now describe as a brain disease. And I mean that quite, my tongue is slightly in my cheek when I say it's a brain disease, but it is really a brain disease. It's called boredom. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, or maybe you've been with others who have, but boredom is not what brains are designed to be. If you can you imagine a child born bored? Kind of defies understanding, doesn't it? You know, children want to explore the world. They want to drop the food on the floor. They want to spit in your face, see what happens. You know, they want to slap your cheek. They want to do anything and just see what happens. That is what the brain is designed to do. That curiosity we're born with is our survival instinct, really, our ability to try and understand how we fit into the environment and how we can adapt to the environment. That's what our brains love to do. A brain that's bored is a brain that's shutting down. There isn't a brain doing what it's supposed to do. And that's why I would call it a disease. It's early onset depression, basically. At least, you know, people who are depressed, they are now recognized as having a disease. Boredom is the sort of amber warning signal that this is what's happening. It's unnatural. She was bored at school, and the problem was that the teachers were teaching to the test. This is something I think that happens over here sometimes too. She was quite good at reading and at maths, and so the teacher had done what teachers are supposed to do. They're supposed to get as many kids through the test as possible. So she divided the class into two. Those that needed her help, those that didn't. The ones that needed her help got all her attention. More kids passed through the tests. The one that didn't need her help, which is where Matilda was, were giving mind-numbingly boring worksheets to do, day after day after day. And that's why she was bored. And who was she cross with? She wasn't cross with the teacher. She was cross with us. Who was sending her to school, for heaven's sake? Her parents. So she didn't want to get up in the morning. She didn't want to get dressed in the morning. She became an angry young person who was bored. This is not a good recipe for success. So we went to see the teacher, and the teacher told us that there wasn't a problem because she was doing fine in her tests. And the head teacher supported the teacher. And we realized we needed to find another school. We couldn't find another school nearby that really was any different, because whenever we went there, they said they were great at getting the kids through the tests. So we decided to do something just as a sort of emergency measure, which changed our lives and is ultimately the reason I'm here now. And I'm going to present you with this new book, which is packed full of this idea, really. We thought we'd home educate, and we thought, how much more damage can we do in kind of 2 or 3 months while we find the right school? And so that's what we did. And in the UK, there's a very long tradition of home education, and there is, I think, in this country too. And I have to tell you, the first 3 months, after 3 months, the Lloyd household resembled the last scene of a play called Hamlet. And I don't know if you're very familiar with Shakespeare, but it's not a happy sight. We decided in our naivety that we needed a timetable, and we needed a curriculum, and we needed a schoolroom at home, and we needed a clock, and we needed a bell. And I'm slightly exaggerating, but not much. And we thought we could do in 2 or 3 months what it would take 2 years to do. How arrogant were we to think this? And I have to say it was hell on earth. It was just a complete catastrophe. And in our desperation, after 3 months, we sat down with Matilda and we said, okay, you just tell us, what are you interested in? Now, we could have asked it in a slightly more kind of empathetic way, perhaps, thinking about it. Nevertheless, there was a little pause, and she told us. And from that moment on, my life changed. She said she was interested in penguins. Now, I don't know if we have any fellow penguin enthusiasts in the room. Is there anybody who would like to put up their hand who thinks has a little connection with... There's a lady there. Oh, no, I thought Angus was, but he was just flicking his glasses. Okay. Penguins. Now, looking back at it, I think to myself, how on earth did we get to a point where we'd never even bothered to ask that question? What are you interested in? We, like the traditional education system, spend all our time thinking that we know best, that we think we know what children should know. So rather than us asking them what they're interested in, we're going to tell them what we think they should know. Now, how do we know what they should need to know? Because when the world is changing so fast, you know, we're out of touch with the modern generation a lot of the time. What's it going to be like in 2 years' time, in 10 years' time, in 15 years' time, in 20 years' time? Nobody knows. The key is that they have a love of learning. If they don't have a love of learning, they won't adapt. If they won't adapt and they don't want to learn new things because they're traumatized by always being grilled as to whether they know what we think they should know, then the whole system is, in a sense, you know, in a paralyzed state. When you ask the question, what are you interested in, everything changes, because suddenly you get back to the brain in that natural curious state when it was born. What am I interested in? How am I going to find out new things? That's fantastic. And what's struck me at this conference is that we all have that common thread between us. We are all people who ask that question, what are you interested in? Because you're librarians, because you're educators thinking about, you know, what it is that motivates children. And whenever I go into a school, I'm always fascinated to see the library, because to my mind, that is the critical place in the school. That's the heart. That's the only place really where that question gets asked. What are you interested in? Because that individual child then can go to any section they like. They can learn about themselves because they can learn about their own interests. They can become experts in something. They can tell other people something that other people don't know. That builds their confidence. Then they want to find out more, so they learn how to read. They want to find out what a word means, and they can find out from that from another book. And suddenly, they are doing what they were born to do, which is to explore through their natural curiosity. So we discovered this, and we went to London Zoo, and we saw penguins. It was great. And then Matilda wanted to do a project about where penguins come from. Where do penguins come from? I know we have an expert there. Antarctica, you're down there. Exactly. But 250 million years ago, Antarctica wasn't down there. It was pretty much where the equator is. And it's moved like a giant jigsaw puzzle piece all the way around the world. And this is something called plate tectonics. And we learned about volcanoes and about earthquakes and about all sorts of geology. And then, of course, now it's down at the bottom of the world that's very cold. So penguins keep warm, as you may know, by huddling together. They're very good, thinking about it, very good example of empathy, really, aren't they, in the natural world? Penguins huddling together to keep warm. And so we draw some penguins on a page. And I said, well, how many penguins are here? And there's one big group, and there's another group of penguins. How many are here? And we count them up. And then if one penguin leaves that group and goes to another one, we can start doing arithmetic. We can do ratios. We can do percentages. And then Matilda stops me and she says, Dad, why did the penguin leave the big group and go to the little group? And I'm thinking to myself, what does it matter? We're doing math. Just count the penguins. She's not doing math. She's doing penguins, right? That's what she's interested in. And before I knew it, she'd gone up to her room and she was writing a story. And I can't remember whether it was the penguin was bullied or it noticed another penguin in distress or it was in love. I'm not quite sure, but she wrote the story. She drew the picture. And then she wants to find out about ice, by the way, which is amazing because you know what happens when you heat it up? It turns to water and then you heat it up more and it disappears. It's like, isn't it amazing? The whole phenomenon where it can rain and then suddenly the water's gone again. Imagine a world where water doesn't dry. That would be an extraordinary place, wouldn't it? And I suddenly realized that even the most ordinary things aren't ordinary to young people. And that's part of the joy of spending time with young people, isn't it? Whether we're parents, grandparents, educators, or whatever, we see the world through their eyes as if we're seeing it for the first time, and it has that magic and that excitement. We want that every day of our lives. Ordinary is like boredom. It's a brain disease. Nothing is ordinary. And so then she wants to do stories about ice, and we learn about the ship that they said would never sink. And it left Southampton in 1912. Maybe you know the story. And because they didn't think it would ever sink, they didn't put enough lifeboats on board. And we discussed something called arrogance. Now, there's a lot of arrogance around. You can spot it today in the newspapers. You can spot it in history. You can talk about arrogance in the context of story to young people. And, of course, the irony is that on that first voyage, it struck an iceberg, and 1,529 people died because there weren't enough lifeboats on board. And you can discuss what irony is in the context of a story because it makes perfect sense. Take it in isolation, out of context, doesn't mean a thing. So context is everything. And then she wants to dance like a penguin. She wants to do poems about penguins. And I think to myself, this is utterly bizarre. All the skills and all the kind of knowledge and the enthusiasm about learning that I want my young child to be able to explore and discover and hone and improve can be learned through penguins. Well, actually, of course, it's not just penguins. It could be learned through anything. If you ask that question, what are you interested in? So ever since then, I've been trying to work out how we can ask that question and how we can provide resources and experiences for children to be able to respond, to give them a chance to explore their individuality, their culture, their background, their own DNA. What does that mean? How is their DNA expressed in the real world through their behavior? That's what they're interested in, and that's how their interests can become fascinating to all of us, because we're all different, which is the wonderful thing. Nature needs diversity. Without it, we're a monoculture and we will wither and become extinct very, very quickly. So here we are, trying to work out what it is that we're interested in. So I started, I gave up my job in Oxford, we bought a camper van and we traveled around Europe for 6 months because this was really interesting, this home education thing. So I thought if I take a year off now and I retire when I'm 75 rather than 65, I thought that would be a good trade. So we bought we call them an RV, don't you? That's right. So we bought this RV and my job was always to do the washing up. And I remember very clearly being in a campsite in Rome, camping Tiber, that's the river that goes through Rome. And usually, if you go to Europe camping, the great thing is that when you go washing up, it's usually outside at a washing up station, and there's always lots of Dutch people. Because the Dutch are everywhere on campsites all over Europe. I don't know, if you know anybody from Holland, you'll know what I mean. And they speak good English, which is great, because I speak a bit of French, but that's about it. And usually what I do is when I go to washing up, I can find out amazing things about the place that we've just arrived, where we should go, where we should not go. And as long as there's a nice Dutch person to talk to, they can give us some advice. That's great. So I can do my business development whilst I'm washing up. And to my great kind of upset on that day at Camping Tiber, there was no one there, not even a Dutch person. No one for me to talk to. I was just me on my own with the dishes. And I remember looking up at a tree, and it's lovely washing up outside and hearing the trees and the birds in the trees. And there was a little brown bird, and I thought, damn it, I wish I could speak bird. Because that bird would have a terrific view of Rome. You know, if they could advise me where the best places to go are, wouldn't that be great? And then I had a look at the tree, and I thought, that's really annoying. Do you know, I have no idea what sort of tree that is. I have no idea what sort of bird that is. All I can tell you is it's a brown bird, and that's a sort of green tree. I have no idea which came first on this planet Earth, the bird or the tree. And then I looked down at the ground, and to my horror, I realized I didn't even know how old the planet Earth is. This is our home, by the way, the planet Earth. How old is the planet Earth? Now, how many of you, with confidence, can put up your hand and tell me you know how old the Earth is? I know somebody knows over there because we did this yesterday, didn't we, Claire? How many of you could put up your hands and say, I really don't know how old the planet Earth is? Right, someone take a picture. Call yourself educated. My goodness. How embarrassing. That's how I felt. I was 36 then, and that was about 15 years ago or something. I had no idea. I studied history at Cambridge, became the Sunday Times science correspondent. I had no idea how old the Earth is. It's a very well-established fact. It's 4.6 billion years old. And I thought, how many other really important things don't I know? How can I find out what I don't know? I need a book that goes from the beginning of time to the present day and connects the dots. And when I went into a bookshop and I asked for this book, they told me that, well, it didn't really exist, that all the information was in different books all over the bookshop. You can buy a history of the world, by the way, but there are two sorts. The first sort is written by a scientist, and it'll take you all through plate tectonics and nature and evolution and everything, but it won't deal with people. And the second sort is generally about people, starting probably in the ancient civilizations of the Middle East through to the present day, and nobody's really interested in the Stone Ages. That just sort of falls through the gaps. So they're both called a history of the world. One's written by a historian, one's written by a scientist. So I thought, I need a book that goes from the beginning of time, where 13.8 billion years ago, that's the beginning of time, according to scientists, when the universe came into existence, to the present day. So I thought, when I finish the camp of Antwerp, I'll go and write that book. And then if I find a new piece of information, I know where to put it, because it can go into context next to something that I do know, and it becomes a really useful way of remembering things. So anyway, to cut a long story a little bit shorter, that book was published by Bloomsbury in 2008. It was called What on Earth Happened, which is a question you might ask yourself on a daily basis, even today. And I was very fortunate. It sold really well and was published in lots of languages. It did particularly well in Japan for some reason, which was very exciting for me. So I went over to Japan lots and lots to give lectures and other things. And then I found myself giving lots of talks in schools and at festivals and at conferences and things. And all I had to offer the sort of 10-year-olds who are at peak curiosity when you're 10 or 9, in the case of Chris, is it Chris? Drew, sorry, 9. Peak curiosity. All I had was a 180,000-word book written for an adult called What on Earth Happened, which isn't really digestible at that age. So I thought I need to find a way of trying to open this big history idea, this connecting knowledge up to other people, to younger people. So I spent 3 months with a pencil and 16 pieces of photocopy paper stick together with sellotape and a rubber, which was really important, in order to sketch out something called what we called a wall book. And I don't know if any of you have seen a wall book, but that's the first one I did, called the Big History Timeline Wall Book. And it unfolds to 3 meters, no, you don't do meters, 6 feet long, just a bit longer than that. And it tells the whole story of the history of the world from the beginning of time to the present day in 1,000 different pictures and captions. And the different colored streams represent different parts of the world. So pink is Europe, green is America, Africa is at the bottom in yellow, Middle East above Europe there, Asia's in brown. And you can't really see on that image so well, I don't think, although has this got a little, oh, it has got a little guy here, look. So if you go to 1522, 500 years ago, anybody know who was the King of England in 1522? Clue, he had 6 wives. Does that help at all? Henry VIII, exactly. Right, okay, I'm going to see if I can find Henry VIII here. He is, there's Elizabeth, his daughter. I've got shaky hands. He's here. There are his 6 wives. These are all the kings and queens of England. We've got France and Spain and Germany and everything here. Same time that he's on the throne, what are they building in the Great Wall? Oh, I've just given it away. Well, they're building in the Ming Dynasty, the second Great Wall of China, which is the one you go and visit there. The first one's over here somewhere. And then if we follow it down, you'll see there's a guy in brown, a monk, who's really upset with the Pope, and he's nailing his protest to the doors of Wittenberg Cathedral. You know the guy? First name Martin? Yeah. Okay, you know the one, Martin Luther. And then Columbus has just discovered the Americas, and the Incas are still living in Machu Picchu. Amazing, isn't that, really? You know, in 1522. And down here there's a thriving city in southern Africa called Great Zimbabwe, where they've discovered that they were trading with the Chinese. They found shards of pottery in Great Zimbabwe. And up here, there's a guy who's discovered something utterly amazing. Nobody believes him, that the Earth goes round the sun. Everybody thought the sun went round the world in that day. Do you know who that is? A Polish astronomer, Nikolai Copernicus, nicknamed Copernicus, if you want something to remember. It's all happening at the same time. So now you can ask the question, what are you interested in? I have a giant version of this. There's like 20 feet long, and I put up in schools. And kids come in and they sit on the floor, and some of them are looking at the dinosaurs, and some are looking at the mammals, some are looking at World War II, and they spot Hitler, and another one spots Donald Trump, because he's on the end there. But it doesn't matter what you're interested in. That's the point. You all can go to different parts. It's a weather vane for saying, what are you interested in? So I got quite excited when I could produce this as a book, and then we did various versions with the Natural History Museum on nature and science and inventions and sport. And when I came over to the States in 2015, we partnered with the American Museum of Natural History, as I explained yesterday, and we had to sort of translate it a little bit, which is and so they took these forward. And then I had the opportunity to. So I was set up my own little publishing company to try and take this idea of asking that question and finding ways of making these resources available to parents and teachers and children. And then from 2015 onwards, it's become, What on Earth Publishing has become much more of a kind of traditional, I suppose in a way, traditional publishing house. And I was very fortunate, thanks to Ellen, to be introduced to a lady called Nancy Ferriston, who was the publisher at National Geographic Kids for 17 years in Washington. And she had just become a consultant and then came on board and has become our publisher ever since. So we now have What on Earth books, we have Britannica books. We did a partnership with Britannica in 2018, and the first Britannica books in that imprint that we've done is this all-new kids encyclopedia, which is this is absolutely everything, which is the wall book, but in a traditional book form, which I recorded as an audio book, actually, at the beginning of the pandemic, so I've really enjoyed doing that. But the Encyclopedia Britannica, of course, this is the first ever one that was published in Scotland in 1768 by a man called William Smellie. And it's divided into, of course, like encyclopedias always used to be, divided into A to Z. And that seems to me to be not particularly helpful these days, because if you think about it, our brains are not divided into separate subjects. You don't have a bit of math and a bit of art and a bit of chemistry and a bit of science, you know. Brains love connecting things together. And when you connect something together, you often go, wow. And that's a universal word, by the way. I can promise you they say that in China. It's like, wow, like that, or Japanese. It's the same word, and it's when your brain connects things together, you learn something new. And you get a little shot of joy, a bit of dopamine in the brain. And that happens because brains love connecting things together. That's how our humor is based, basically. When we have a joke, it's two things you didn't realize were connected that get connected together, and you laugh. It's the joy of learning, is through connecting things. But we're obsessed with splitting things up into little bits. We split them up into curriculums, into timetables, into subjects. That's not non-fiction. That's fiction. We create a fictional world for children that doesn't represent the way that their brains are wired by dividing things up into silos like the Victorians did and never thinking about it, whether that makes sense, never giving them the chance to make connections of their own and experience the thrill and the joy of that discovery that they've made themselves. It's the same with an old encyclopedia, A to Z. Is the brain divided into A to Z? Do you think you've got a bit of A here and a bit of B and a bit of C? Of course not. How ridiculous. So we decided to go for a different model where it's called, we have children over in the UK. I apologize about that. You have kids over here, so we have to do the translation thing. And so it's divided into 8 chapters where you go from the beginning of time to the present day, which is much more representative of how our brains have come to be. 4 chapters natural history, 4 chapters from ancient civilizations to the present day. And the other thing, it's called What We Know and What We Don't. Because I've realized now that many of the most interesting questions don't have answers. Or at least nobody can agree what the answers are. Everybody's arguing these days, aren't they? It doesn't matter what happens. And so therefore, why don't we go to an encyclopedia to find out what we don't know? And that seems to be at the heart of sort of this whole curiosity thing. So throughout the book, there are, in every spread, there is known unknowns, things that we know that we don't know the answer to, that people can't agree on, etc., etc. And those are often the most fascinating things. In fact, we are just working on a new Britannica encyclopedia of the unknown to try and bring all together all the things that we don't know the answers to. And hopefully that will pique the interest of young people and make them want to become experts. That's another thing. Experts. Usually in encyclopedias, they're in the footnotes. You don't really find out about the experts. We bring them to the front and we tell them their stories and give you their biographies. And every chapter has a list of experts, not a list, has their pictures, has what you love about being a geomorphologist. Oh, that's a cool job. What's one of those? and then you can find out. Maybe you want to be a volcanologist, or you want to be a paleontologist, or whatever else it is. These are the things hopefully young people can aspire to and see role models in the encyclopedia, the experts we've used to verify the information. The other thing, of course, is that non-fiction, which I'm a champion of really, is it's a great opportunity to try and give children those critical thinking skills, because obviously everything we publish, we have to be absolutely sure as we can is accurate. So we have to have it verified 3 times. We have to really source the information. How do we know that this is right? And of course, there's never been a time in history where that question and that skill of that critical information has been more important than today. So a little bit of background there that leads up to this book that I'm delighted to be able to show you. It's Up to Us. And this came out of a project when I read about in January last year, the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, announced an initiative he called the Magna Carta. And the Magna Carta is a new pledge, a new set of pledges that we must have towards the planet. Now, many of you, I'm sure all of you, may have heard of Magna Carta. Have you heard of Magna Carta? Magna Carta goes back 800 years when my country was a dictatorship. And we had a very bad man ruling the country. Thinking about it, dictators are, generally speaking, bad men. And this bad man, who was our dictator, was called John. And nobody liked John because he thought he had all his power came from God. So he could do anything he liked because that was God's will. It's quite simple. The idea came from France, from the Normans, the divine right of kings. And John was a Norman king. And so he had all his power from God. He could do anything he liked. He'd take your money, didn't like the look of you because he didn't like people with beards. So he sticks you in jail. You haven't done anything wrong. You've got no choice. There you go, straight into jail. And if he wants to build a fancy palace or a castle, he'll take your money. He would even steal all the fish out of the River Thames near Windsor, and so there was nothing left for the people in Shoreditch. Just imagine how they would feel, right? And they started to get very angry, and the nobles got angry, and they ganged up against him on June the 16th, 1215 in Runnymede, and they surrounded him saying, "King John, you will not steal all the fish out of the River Thames. You will not lock people up just because you don't like the look on their faces. You won't steal all their money. You must obey the law." And they wrote 63 laws, which are the 63 clauses of Magna Carta. And this idea of the fact that our rulers are subject to the law has become a very important part of our culture, I think. It's so relevant even to this day, isn't it, really? I can't believe how history, you think that's 800 years ago. There is no distance in history. The themes, many of the characteristics of the past are replaying themselves today, sometimes and often with tragic consequences, I'm afraid. But Magna Carta was this big pledge we have in order to allow everybody to be able to benefit from a set of laws that have to be obeyed. Terra Carta is the idea to do the same with the planet. Prince Charles has been a crusader for trying to put nature first all his life. He's often been ridiculed because he likes to talk to his plants and he likes to paint and he's a very artistic person, but for some reason the press have always been very unkind really to Prince Charles. But I think a lot of people realize now that he's been saying things that we should have been paying attention to decades ago. And so Terra Carta was born as an idea to tell businesses and business leaders that they need to put nature first, not shareholders first. Now, when I read about this, I was intrigued because I thought, hang on, here's an opportunity, maybe a bigger opportunity to do a children's book about Terra Carta. Because many people, when they get to the age of 30, 40, and they're in their busy business lives, it's quite difficult to expect them to start to put nature first when they're in the rat race, the dog-eat-dog world of business. But maybe if we could reach those people through their own children in the home by providing a book that is going to be read out loud, ideally, in the context of parents with children, maybe there's an opportunity there for us to be able to reach adults as well as children and have a bigger impact over the medium to long term. So let's do a children's book. And this was in January 2021, and we thought, why don't we publish it in time for COP26? Do you remember that, COP26? Happened in Glasgow in November. And so, having thought about this in January, it took me a little while to sort of reach Prince Charles's people with the idea. But anyway, by March or so, I managed to sort of beat down the door and pitched the idea, and fortunately they thought it was a great idea. And so we partnered with the Prince's Foundation, which is Prince Charles's, one of his main charities up in Scotland, and they do amazing work on sustainable education, and they have a cookery school and a woodworking school, and they have painting schools, and they have holistic medical centers. I mean, really is amazing stuff. So they became our partner, and we realized that we needed, in order to have books ready in time for COP26, we really needed, the book had to go to press in August. And we wanted to make sure this was a showcase of environmentally responsible publishing. So we're going to print it in the UK, which is pretty difficult, and on vegetable inks, and to do it in the most sensitive way we could for the environment. But we had to, so that gave us from sort of April till August to do a 64-page fully illustrated children's book, which is a bit tricky, to be honest. Yeah, the team wasn't that impressed with the idea, but anyway. So the first thing was, I thought, well, I'll write the text. That's okay, so we don't have to find an author. So I did that with Nancy, and but then we needed to find an illustrator. And so we started getting in touch with illustrators and said, we've got this great thing, we've got Prince Charles involved, you're going to love this. And most of them said, yes, I want to be involved, that's great. We want 33 spreads, and you've got 3 weeks. And as you can imagine, we didn't get very far with that. So we found, rather inadvertently and to our surprise, that the only route possible was to try and engage with 33 individual illustrators, because they could all do a spread each. And actually, one of the Terra Carta pledges is that we will work as teams. Regardless of our discipline, we need to work together to try and combat the challenge of climate change. And so we found ourselves having to do this in order to make this book. 33 artists, and we thought, well, we want to get as many artists from as many places in the world as possible, because the whole philosophy of the book is it's up to us wherever we are. It's no good if people in the UK are very good about the environment, but people in China aren't, or if people in Bhutan are fantastic, but people in the States aren't. It's all up to us. We've all got to change the way we're thinking and our priorities for us to have a chance of meeting this challenge of climate change. So having 33 authors from as many different diverse cultures. And then, of course, as the artwork started to come back, we started to see this incredibly rich representation of the story through the visual, cultural lens of all these different artists from around the world. And it was stunning. You know, it wasn't like we were in control. I guess sometimes fiction authors, wonder what their characters are going to do when they start, writing the next chapter. They don't necessarily feel in control. And it felt like this here. We didn't really know what the artists were going to do, but they all did incredibly inspiring things. And they were so excited to be part of a project with other illustrators. People that they'd heard of sometimes, people that they'd admired, or people perhaps they hadn't heard of, or to see how the different illustrators approached the challenge. So, here's Prince Charles, and this is the launch of the book at COP26, where the Duchess of Cornwall, her name is Camilla, she presented the book to a head teacher here in a Scottish school, and, this is Prince Charles's house, one of his little places called Dumfries House, where the charity's based, just so you know, up in Scotland, just south of Glasgow. Anyway, what I thought I'd do is I'd just quickly show you a little bit from inside the book, and then I want to, I'm running out of time already, I want to show you a little storytelling technique that I use. This is an artist from Colombia. You see all the children playing at the bottom. You can see the 33 artists' names all listed here, and you can just see from the spelling of the names the incredible diversity that we were able to achieve. The story goes in 4 parts. There's a foreword by the Prince of Wales, and then we look at nature before people started messing around with it. Then we see what people have done to nature. Then we look at the effect on the planet. And then we look at these new pledges, what we can do together to try and address the problem. So we are zooming out and trying to give children that really holistic perspective, not just the children, their parents too, their grandparents too, everybody that perspective. So we're not just saying, here are some handy tips of what you can do at home. Let's tell the story from all angles. There's the first... can you guess where this artist is from, by the way? We can see a little sort of volcano with the snow at the top, and Iceland, yes. Yes, the blonde hair maybe is a little bit of a Viking trait, woolly jumpers. And the artist there, Gunilla. By the way, all these QR codes, I don't know if you've seen the exhibition downstairs in the atrium, but you can zap the QR code and you can see an interview, 2 or 3 minutes from each of the artists, where they tell you the inspiration behind their artwork. And making the artists the storytellers by, I was trying to suggest this yesterday really, as a way of making books, not just books, but getting the storytellers to have another voice. It's really easy to do that now. You know, we could do that on Zoom, and then to create. And we even created a quiz, and we had 2 entries. Here we are. Isn't that fantastic? Anybody else enter the quiz? No, never mind. Well, on your way out, you can have a go if you like. Anyway, we'll choose one of those to be our winner. All right. You've got an idea. Great. Super. So Prince Charles, now the first sentence of his foreword here is really important. He says, children have a unique curiosity for nature and this amazing planet we call home. This is because part of being young is knowing that we are in fact part of nature ourselves. Now, this is very interesting because the older we get, the more detached we tend to become from nature. We're in our cars, we're on our screens, we're worried about, you know, paying the bills. We're not really in touch in the same way that young people are when they love to be outdoors because they want to be on the beach, or they want to be playing outside, or they want to be swimming, or whatever else it is. So we can learn so much from young people to help us remind us that we are part of nature, not apart from nature. So the appeal here is to activate young people to, in a sense, remind the grown-ups that if you think you are part of nature, then that's actually the way we're going to address this problem. If you think you're apart from nature, we're going to make the problem worse. In some ways, it's as simple as that. So then we step through. This is an artist from Greece. We live our lives surrounded by people and other living things. This is quite a famous US artist, Raoul, who you may know, and he's fantasizing about when he was small and reading stories, he would often go outside. And so he's painted this picture of himself as a boy, and you can almost hear the water in the background and the birds in the trees and all the rest of it here. What I'm actually going to do now, before I completely run out of time, is I'm going to share with you a little storytelling technique that I use with a lot of my books. And I'm just going to use a little example. You have to excuse me. Here we go. Now, this is probably where I need this guy. Does this guy work? This guy, does that work all right? Oh, good. Okay, right. There we are. This is my storytelling coat. Do you like my storytelling coat? Do you? I hope that you know, librarians will take note that storytelling coats are very effective for telling stories. This was my gown when I was at Cambridge. It's been slightly modified, as you can see. And I have all these pockets. And the great thing about pockets is you can put things in the pockets. And what I try to do with all my books is to choose key moments. This one has 15 pockets because actually I use it for my book Absolutely Everything, which goes from the beginning of time to the present day in 15 chapters. And so I choose one story in each chapter, and I try to think of a link between that story and an everyday object, just something you find at school or at home, whatever it may be. And when I explain to the child the link, I'm hoping what will happen is the connection is they realize that actually we're surrounded by objects that can link us to amazing stories. All we have to do is to use the brains that love to connect to make the connections. So, for example, in this case, I've got in my pocket number 3, I've got a little bird here. Isn't that lovely? And you can see here, Raoul's drawn the little bird on the top of the book. And if we give the bird a little squeeze... I can hear, that's great. You all go, like that. That's because you're feeling part of nature, not apart from nature. And that's our natural state. That's how we like to be. Birdsong is such a beautiful thing. And in fact, birdsong in Nashville has been rather good. I don't know if you've been wandering around and listened to the birds. There are lots of birds around here. Anyway, fun fact. For a long, long time, scientists didn't really know what birds were, so you know what they called them? Birds. That's right. But they're not actually birds. So we have discovered. They found fossils of dinosaurs with feathers on that are dinosaurs, and the dinosaurs had feathers to keep their bodies warm. Some of those dinosaurs managed to flap their wings, as it were, take to the skies, and in fact they've sequenced the genes of birds and discovered they're all theropod dinosaurs. That's the same family as T-Rex. So next time you ever go to somewhere called KFC, have you ever been there? You can complain to the manager and say, this should not be called KFC, it should be KFD, because it's Kentucky Fried Dinosaur. That's what chickens are, they're dinosaurs, and that's what dinosaur tastes like, and that's what you have at Thanksgiving, deep-fried dinosaur. If I'm in the right part of the world, I believe that's probably the way you like to take it. Anyway, there we are. So, I needed a clicker. So I'm going to whiz on very, very quickly to this. This is a Turkish artist. And of course, Nate was surrounded by nature, but often nature, we can't see the important parts of nature. It's so small. So these are little bacteria. And he's painted them all as individuals. And if you ask a child, which is your favorite, what's your favorite bacteria on the screen, madam? Can you give us a... Yellow blobby one, okay. And your favorite one, madam?
I like the guy with the mustache.
Fantastic. You see, we all like different ones because we're all different. And he's saying, so are they. Nature, this is all about biodiversity and the power of everything being different, whether you can see it or you can't see it. And of course, we all depend on these microbes because it helps us with our digestion, essentially. And I explain to the children how you can tell if you've got a good, healthy lot of microbes, because sometimes it even makes a noise. Because that's what happens if you've got a good, healthy lot of microbes inside your intestines. This is a beautiful work of art. Anyone guess where this artist comes from? Which country might be represented in that style? Where? No, it's not actually. It's got that Dreamtime feel about it, hasn't it? It's not. This is a lady called Poonan Mistry who now lives in the States, but she's from India. And I don't know if you can see, it's almost like pointillism. It's like an embroidery. And it's just wonderful to see. This is explaining how we depend on three things for our survival. And in fact, I'll just do this. Have I got time to do this? Very quickly. I've got one of them in my pocket number one. Pocket number one. Yes, pocket number one. Pocket number one contains, actually, I have to say, contains the most amazing thing you will ever see. Right? It's the most amazing thing. Whoever I need a volunteer to pick my pocket number one, by the way, but whoever, Angus has got... Angus, come to the front. Thank you. Very good indeed. You can't say no to that. Angus, there we are. Stand there. Thank you very much. This is Angus. Yes, it's so special that Angus will probably remember this day for the rest of his life, and may he live a long time. And so that is so special, Angus. Now, what I want you to do is, when Angus picks pocket number one, I want you to look into his eyes, and so you can experience the feeling of excitement and exhilaration when he sees what's inside, okay? Angus, when you pick pocket number one, I want you to show everybody what it is and look at them so they can see into your brain and your feelings, okay? You ready? You're ready. This is Angus, pocket number one. What do we got? Angus, it is... Oh my goodness. It is a Marlish. It is a bottle of water. Yes, and it's not any old water. I can vouch for the fact that this is, in fact, came from the toilet just down the corridor on the right. Okay, it's that special. Don't be fooled by the label, all right? Okay, now, deep down, Angus may be experiencing something like disappointment or even anticlimax, but he's being very grown up about it, as you can tell. He was hoping it might be, I don't know, an iPhone 13 or a bar of chocolate with a winning, with a golden ticket. It could have been, but no, it is a bottle of toilet water. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to put this back in my pocket, and with Angus's permission, we're going to demonstrate to you why it is the most amazing thing he's ever seen. Angus, stand over there, please. I want you to imagine that Angus has been wandering through a desert for 3 days. He's had nothing to eat or drink. He was with his friends, but Angus, unfortunately, as you may or may not know, has smelly breath. So they all left him on his own. And he's been wandering through the desert for 3 days. How would he feel after 3 days without having anything to eat or drink? Any words come to mind? What do you think? Weak. He's very weak. He's hot. He's exhausted. He's so exhausted he can't even stand up. He's so exhausted he's lying flat on the ground. Angus. Yes, poor Angus. 3 days. And his lips are cracking up and his face is all burned. Oh, dear. He even starts to hallucinate. You know what I mean? What do you think Angus sees in the distance? No, this is non-fiction, guys. He sees a man wearing a coat of many pockets, of course. And the man says, Angus. And he thinks, how do you know my name? Doesn't matter. He says, Angus, pick my pocket number 1. Now, Angus, when you pick my pocket number 1, with the last ounce of strength, I want you to imagine what it would be like if you hadn't drunk anything for 3 days. I want you to look at Angus's face and his expression when he sees what's inside pocket number 1. Angus, what have you got? Look at that! Whoa, it's water! Woo! The difference between life and death, Angus. Yes, yes. It came, yes, it's straight out of the water, straight out of the column. Oh, boy. Thank you, Angus. Wasn't that lovely? Yes. Round of applause for Angus for being such a good sport. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Angus. So, this is it. The difference between life and death. Everything that's living has to have water in it. If you don't have water, you can't live. There's no water on the moon, there's no life on the moon. Even a bit of bacteria is a little blob of water. If you ever have had or have children or students who have or are having something called an identity crisis, you know what I mean? My advice to you is to suggest that they go and look in the mirror and remind themselves that they're basically a bag of water. That's it. Up to about here, there's a bit of fat and gristle and fiber, and the rest of it is water. Because all the chemistry for life has to happen in solution. You have to have liquid water. Where does most, apart from the toilet, where does most of the water in this bottle come from? Does anybody know? And I haven't got much time, so I'll quickly let you know that the scientific theory is that most of the world's water arrived on the planet Earth over 4 billion years ago on a giant bombardment of comets from outer space. That's how the sea came. It arrived from outer space. These comets were more than 100 miles wide. Can you imagine a ball of ice more than 100 miles wide? Not one of them, but thousands of them crashing into the Earth. And as they rip through the upper atmosphere, the ice melts and turns into... That's right. So next time Angus has a bath... Do you ever have a bath, Angus? Okay. He can think to himself, wow, I'm surrounded by this incredible stuff that came from outer space more than 4 billion years ago on a giant bombardment of comets. You see, nothing is ordinary. Everything is amazing. So, 3 things that we need. In this picture, we need the oceans, which is the water. We need air, which is where we get the oxygen from. And we need soil, dirt, which this lady here kindly mentioned, because that's how things grow. Without those things, there is nothing. So, Poonam Mystery has kind of put this together very well, and I'm completely going to be out of time, but I'm going to whiz through this very quickly. The end of the nature part looks at this really special moment. If you remember the pictures of Earthrise, do you remember when the astronauts first went to the moon? They saw something nobody had seen before. We've all seen the sunrise and the moonrise, but nobody's seen Earthrise. And how fragile and delicate and special this planet is when you see it rising up in the blackness of space. And you can see everything you need for life on this delicate kind of... So of all the unimaginably large number of planets in our vast universe, Earth is the only one that we're sure has life. And that makes our world a truly wondrous place, and nature an infinitely precious thing. So then we step into the world of people. This is Sidney Smith, who is a US artist. I don't know if you've come across him. Canadian, that's it. North American, that's the one. I've made that mistake before. And it's a beautiful picture of the children looking out over the ocean, but of course there's trouble brewing. You can see that in the background. And here we have an Argentinian artist showing us how we've harnessed nature to make a kind of artificial world that we enjoy. And this artificial world is full of cars and theme parks, and I think they're toffee apples, and video games, and highways and motorways. And in order to create this world, here is a US artist, Wesley Bedrosian, we have had to grow our food to feed 8 billion people in very, very environmentally unfriendly ways. There's a crop duster there. You can see that the pollution and the runoff is going into the ocean. You can see that the cows are all gathered together there in a horrible sort of confinement in order to have enough milk and meat and all the rest of it, because there are so many people. And of course, that is having a huge impact on the oceans. You can see the plastic bottles and the rubber tire. And this artist delivered us a beautiful painting of a coral reef. We had to send it back and ask them to sort of pale it, because of course the coral reef is bleaching, so that's why the colors are bleached here. This is an Israeli artist who is showing you how for a long time people thought, because there were so many animals and plants and such a big wide ocean and lots of air and soil, we could carry on like this forever. Other living things might suffer, but not us. We're people, we thought. We'll be okay. We forgot that we were nature too. Apart from nature, not part of nature. Now, I say that, this illustrator's actually put a little something in that reminds us that not everybody in this picture is not paying attention to nature. There is that little girl on the right, do you see? And she's noticed nature, just a child sniffing at the beautiful fragrance of a rose. And these are the sort of things that if you let the illustrators tell a story in their own way, they just put them in. It's not briefed out at all. And then we move on to the planet and look at the consequences for the planet, that we know that the Earth is getting hotter. And one of the... there we are. This is a really beautiful painting of what nature is doing, 24/7 really, which it is taking the carbon dioxide, and we explain that carbon dioxide is like a blanket. If you have too many blankets on your bed, of course you get uncomfortably hot. If you don't have any blankets, you get too cold. So think of carbon dioxide as an invisible blanket. And nature has this process where the trees are like straws, and they suck down the carbon dioxide, bury the carbon in the ground, just to make sure that the blanket doesn't get too thick. And when they bury the carbon in the ground, it turns into something, which I have in a pocket here somewhere. Pocket number, where are we over? Angus, what am I doing here? You didn't steal anything on the way. Pocket number 6, for some reason I have it here. That's exactly what I want you to know. I mean, not exactly what I want you to want to know. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you what's in number 2 just yet. What have I got here? Anybody know? A lump of coal. And what did coal used to be? Dinosaurs? Plant matter, very good. Now, I've done this talk a lot of times in schools. There's a huge gap. Children do not know what coal used to be. This is a problem. It's not difficult, it's just somehow not there in the curriculum. It's one of those gaps, like how old is the Earth, Claire? You know how old the Earth is, right? Coal is, of course, the remains of trees that have rotten over millions and millions of years. It's the trapped carbon down under the ground. And, of course, it's not just coal. It's the remains of sea creatures as well, like crabs and fish and the rest of it. When they decompose at the bottom of the seafloor, they don't turn into coal, of course. They turn into oil, did I hear you say? That's where oil comes from. It's the dead sea matter from millions and millions of years ago. That's why they're called fossil fuels. That's why you sometimes fill up your car at a gas station that's called Shell. Do you have Shell over here? Yeah, fossil fuels, right? Making sense, I hope. This is trapping the carbon in the ground. But what we've done, this is an illustration by Nick Sharratt, is that we've dug up the coal, pumped out the oil, used it to make electricity for our cars, for our aeroplanes, and put that carbon back in the atmosphere. And the blanket's getting thicker and thicker and thicker, so the world is getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And what's happening is that the world is drying out. This is an Aboriginal Australian artist called Black Douglas. This is where his ancestors used to live, and it was a beautiful, verdant place with lots of vegetation. It's now arid, dry desert. And the trees are asking a question. Do you know what question the trees are asking? It's the shape of the trees. They're asking the question, why? Why are we doing this to our beloved planet, etc.? This is the Chinese artist I mentioned yesterday, briefed to give us an illustration of what the consequences of rising sea levels are on the melting ice caps. And she's chosen to draw this glacier that's split off into an iceberg in the shape of a polar bear. The polar bear who can't reach her mother anymore, the little baby, because they've been split up, as you can see. You can see this huge bit of ice smashing into the water, and the people, so small and insignificant, looking on helplessly. There's nothing that they can do. When all the ice has melted from the North Pole and the South Pole and Greenland and Antarctica, does anybody know here by how many feet the seas will rise? 60 feet. That would be amazing. It's actually about 210 feet. It's a lot higher than that. In fact, if you were to go to London, where I'm sort of from, and when there's no ice left on the ice caps, you would go on a canoe through London, and the only bit of Big Ben that you would see is the clock face. The rest of the tower would be underwater. So you can imagine what it would be like in Florida. You have to get your scuba diving kit out, etc., etc. So there's a lot at stake, is there not? So here we are. This is about human refugees fleeing from climate catastrophes, being dragged out of the water, living in tented cities. My goodness, this is happening today. And a lot of conflict is driven by mineral and resource scarcity too, of course, in lots of parts of the world, which is ultimately driven by climate change. So we come on to the Terra Carta pledges. I'm plus 2 minutes, Ellen, and I apologize, and I will be finished in two. This is a visual metaphor, and it's a Korean artist saying that we're on a tightrope, and she's made a child, the symbol of hope, and on the child's head is nature, and the little leaves falling off are the leaves of seeds of hope as we navigate from a state of nature through to our sort of industrial future, as it were. But of course, nature is perilously perched on her head, and one little trip and nature will collapse. And that's kind of where we are. And if you want to, you explain that to children, and then you ask them to ask their parents if they can think what this picture means. And then they can explain to their parents what a visual metaphor actually is. We're turning the children into the storytellers, activating the children to get their parents to think that they're part of nature, not apart from nature. We need to use renewable energy. This boy is having a beautiful time just playing with a kite and his dog outside. And of course, we've got 4 different forms of renewable energy, of rewilding the landscape, another one of the terracotta pledges, of labeling our products that we buy, not just how many calories are in there, but how many food miles they've been on, how much carbon dioxide is responsible as a result of buying that product, how much has been emitted. So we went to a lot of trouble to work out exactly how much carbon dioxide is emitted as a result of printing and making one book. The answer is 280 grams. But if you write that on the back of a book, which we have, it doesn't mean very much to a child. So it is the equivalent of a light bulb, 60-watt light bulb, burning for 43 minutes. And it's the equivalent of if a large tree would absorb 280 grams of carbon dioxide in 8 hours. So it gives you something to think about, doesn't it, in terms of what this means. And we've obviously funded, as part of this program, the planting of trees to try and ensure that the net carbon emissions of this book, at least, are offset. So just trying to make sure the information so consumers can make an informed choice. This is the wisdom of our Aboriginal ancestors who obviously lived in a world without using fossil fuels. This is an Aboriginal Canadian artist working as a team, as I mentioned before, and finally just coming together in a really important ceremony, people from all kinds of cultures to plant a tree, as you can see in there. If we work together, nature, including people, will be around for a very, very long time to come. Because we can do this, we must do this, and we have to do it now because... it's up to us. Exactly. Thank you very much indeed. There are the artists. Thank you. And there am I, if you want to get in touch. Thank you for the honour, Ellen.
Thank you. That was wonderful.